Look at you. You smell like failure and grease. My mother, Evelyn, blocked the dining room door, stopping me from joining the party I had just spent 10 hours cooking for. I cannot have my guests seeing a low-level risk analyst standing next to millionaires. It lowers the stock value of this family. She reached into her designer clutch, pulled out a crumpled $20 bill, and shoved it deep into my apron pocket. Take this for cab fare, and leave through the back door. Do not embarrass me. I walked to my 12-year-old sedan, the gravel crunching under my sensible work shoes. Behind me, the sound of laughter and clinking champagne glasses drifted from the house. My brother Julian was probably toasting to his new venture, a cryptocurrency arbitrage firm that existed only on a glossy business card and a website he had paid a freelancer $50 to build. As I turned the key in the ignition, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 3 decades. In the Fairbanks family economy, everyone had a role. Julian was the genius, the golden boy who was always one deal away from $1 billion. Despite the fact that he was 34 and had never held a job for longer than 6 months. Bianca, my younger sister, was the star, an influencer who curated a life of luxury on credit cards that I knew were maxed out. And me? I was the black hole. That was what my mother called me when she thought I was not listening. I was the boring one, the one who absorbed light and gave nothing back because I refused to play their game of smoke and mirrors. I was a senior risk analyst for a major insurance firm. My job was literally to look at disasters and calculate how much they would cost. It was fitting, really. I spent my days analyzing data for clients, and my nights analyzing the slow-motion train wreck of my own family. They called me stingy because I drove a used car and lived in a studio apartment. They called me ungrateful because I did not applaud Julian's delusions. But they never called me when the bills were paid. They only called when the lights were about to go out. I merged onto the highway, the city lights blurring past me. My mind drifted back to a Tuesday afternoon 3 years ago. It was the day of Evelyn's prestigious bridge club meeting. I had come over to drop off some groceries, only to find her pacing the hallway, pale and trembling. The power company had just sent a technician to disconnect the electricity. She had not paid the bill in 7 months. The total arrears were $4,200. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. Maya, the ladies will be here in 20 minutes. If the lights go out, I will die of shame. You have to fix this. She did not ask if I had the money. She did not ask if I could afford it. She just demanded a fix. I had just received my annual performance bonus. It was supposed to be for my retirement fund, but I looked at her panic, and the old conditioning kicked in. The desperate need to be useful. I pulled out my phone and paid the entire balance right there in the hallway. $4,200. Gone in a single click. When the technician left and the lights stayed on, Evelyn did not hug me. She did not say thank you. She smoothed her silk blouse, looked at my off-the-rack cardigan, and frowned. You really should buy better clothes, Maya. That sweater is pilling. It makes you look destitute. Then she opened the door for her friends, smiling as if nothing had happened, leaving me standing in the shadows of the foyer. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. For years, I told myself I was being a good daughter. I was helping. But as I drove away from the ancestral home with $20 in my pocket, the truth finally hit me with the precision of a mathematical equation. I was not their daughter. I was their insurance policy. I was the unacknowledged safety net they relied on while they walked the tightrope of their own vanity. They thought I was boring. They thought I was safe. They forgot that my entire career was built on spotting liabilities. And tonight, for the first time, I realized that the biggest liability in my life was them. There was one detail about that afternoon in the kitchen that I did not mention earlier. Before Evelyn shoved the money into my pocket, while I was scraping duck fat off the roasting pans, I saw something in the recycling bin. It was bright red. The specific, urgent shade of red that banks use when they want to scream at you without making a sound. It was buried under potato peelings and empty wine bottles, torn in half. But the header was unmistakable. Notice of default. I had fished it out while Evelyn was busy checking her makeup in the hallway mirror. I folded the damp, stained paper and tucked it into my bra. Now, sitting at my small desk in my quiet apartment, I laid the pieces out like a puzzle. The document was a final warning. The mortgage on the ancestral home had not been paid in 4 months. But that did not make sense. I knew Evelyn's finances. I knew my father had left her the house free and clear. There should not have been a mortgage to default on, unless someone had taken out a new loan. I opened my laptop and navigated to the county clerk's online portal. Most people think you need a badge or a warrant to see property records, but you do not. You just need an address and an internet connection. Public records are the great equalizer. I typed in the address of the house I grew up in. The search results loaded in seconds. There it was. A home equity line of credit, taken out 3 years ago. The amount made my stomach turn. $220,000. I clicked on the digital copy of the deed of trust. I scrolled down to the signature line. There was my mother's name, Evelyn Fairbanks, signed in her elegant, looping cursive. It looked perfect. It looked official. But something about the date next to the signature gnawed at me. October 14th, 3 years ago. I stood up and walked to my filing cabinet. I am a person who keeps receipts. I keep tax returns from a decade ago. I keep warranties for toasters I threw out years ago. And I kept the medical files from the time I took 2 weeks of unpaid leave to nurse my mother through her extensive cosmetic surgery. I pulled the file labeled Evelyn Medical. I flipped through the discharge papers until I found the surgical log. Date of admission. October 14th. Time of surgery. 8 in the morning. I looked back at the computer screen. The notary stamp on the loan document was dated October 14th at 10 in the morning. At 10 in the morning on that day, Evelyn was unconscious in a recovery room. Her face bandaged, heavily sedated on painkillers. I knew this because I was the one sitting in the hard plastic chair next to her bed, holding her hand while she moaned about the pressure on her sinuses. She could not have signed that document. I looked at the witness signature on the loan. It was illegible. A scrawl. But I knew who had been house-sitting while I was at the hospital. Julian. The genius. The golden boy. He had forged our mother's signature while she was under the knife. Leveraged the equity in her home to the tune of $220,000. And likely gambled it all away on crypto schemes and luxury rentals. But here was the truly sick part. Evelyn had to know. The bank sends statements. The bank calls. She had torn up that red notice, which meant she had seen it. She knew Julian had robbed her. Stripped the equity from the roof over her head. And she had stayed silent. She chose to protect his crime rather than expose his failure. She was willing to lose the house to keep his secret. I sat back in my chair. The glow of the screen illuminating the dark apartment. They were drowning. They were dragging the heavy, gilded anchor of their own lies, and the water was rising fast. For years, my instinct would have been to dive in, to call them, to scream, to fix it, to pay it off. But then I looked at the $20 bill sitting on my desk. The payment for my dignity. I realized then that I was not the lifeboat. I was the shark. And sharks do not save drowning swimmers. They wait. I did not go to the police immediately. Police reports take months to process. Fraud investigations can drag on for years, often ending with a slap on the wrist or a plea deal that saves no one. I did not want a long, drawn-out battle. I wanted absolute, irreversible control. I called an old colleague from law school, a woman named Sarah, who specialized in distressed assets and private equity. We met in a quiet office downtown, far away from the prying eyes of my family's social circle. I need to form an LLC, I told her. Anonymous. Delaware registration. We named it Nemesis Holdings. It sounded corporate enough to be boring, but I knew what it meant. The strategy was not to buy the debt from the bank. Banks move too slowly for that. The strategy was to become the savior they were desperate for. I knew the foreclosure timeline. The bank would be sending the final notice to vacate within 30 days. Julian would be panicking. He could not refinance because his credit was destroyed, and Evelyn could not refinance because she had no income. They were unbankable. So, Nemesis Holdings would step in. We drafted a proposal for a hard money rescue loan. In the financial world, this is a loan of last resort. It is expensive, fast, and dangerous. We offered to pay off the existing mortgage and the fraudulent credit line entirely, rolling the debt into a new, private loan. The interest rate was predatory 14%. The term was short 6 months. But to a drowning man, a shark looks like a log. I knew Julian would see the cash, and not the consequences. I used my savings money I had scraped together from years of living in a shoebox apartment and driving a clunker to fund the capital. I was betting everything I had on their greed. Once the paperwork was ready, I sat back and did the hardest thing of all. I did nothing. In risk assessment, there is a golden rule that I live by. Never interrupt an enemy when they are making a mistake. I spent my evenings in my apartment, scrolling through social media on a burner account. I watched my brother Julian post stories from a VIP booth in a club, holding a bottle of vodka that cost $300. He captioned it, "Closing deals." The empire grows. I saw Bianca posting unboxing videos of designer shoes, complaining about how hard it was to find good lighting in her bedroom. I saw Evelyn at a brunch, smiling that tight, practiced smile, pretending her world was not crumbling beneath her feet. The foreclosure clock was ticking down. 20 days. 14 days. 10 days. Every bottle Julian popped. Every shoe Bianca bought. Every lie Evelyn told was another shovel of dirt out of the hole they were digging. If I had called Evelyn then, if I had run to her screaming that her son was a thief and her house was gone, she would have hated me. She would have called me a liar. She would have accused me of being jealous of Julian's success. She would have defended the parasite until it killed her. So I let the silence stretch. I let the fear build in their house while I sat in mine, drinking tea and reviewing the contract clauses. Silence is not passive. Silence is not weakness. In the wild, the predator does not roar before it strikes. It waits until the prey is comfortable. It waits until there is no escape. I waited until 3 days before the auction. Then, I told Sarah to make the call. The bank's final eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was taped to the front door of the ancestral home. A stark, neon orange piece of paper that no amount of social maneuvering could hide from the neighbors. According to Sarah, my lawyer, Evelyn did not handle it with grace. She apparently tried to peel it off with her fingernails, shredding the paper but leaving the adhesive residue, then locked herself in her bedroom with a bottle of Chardonnay. Julian, true to form, was not even there. He was likely dodging calls from his bookie. This was the moment they were most exposed, the only moment the trap could work. 2 hours later, Sarah knocked on their door looking like help, not a predator. Muted gray suit, a sensible luxury sedan, and a leather portfolio stamped Nemesis Holdings. She presented the offer: we drafted a bridge loan that would pay off the bank in full and stop foreclosure immediately. The terms were brutal, high interest, short runway. But to a panicking family, there was only one headline that mattered. House saved. Evelyn didn't hesitate. She devoured it. I knew it, she told Sarah, practically glowing. Julian's networking finally paid off. He said he was close to private capital. He's a genius. Banks never understand visionaries. Sarah smiled politely. Mr. Fairbanks certainly has a reputation. When Julian arrived, he looked like a man walking to his execution until he realized the executioner had brought him lunch. He scanned the numbers. Enough to wipe out the HELOC and the mortgage, plus a 6-month grace period. To him, it wasn't rescue. It was time to hustle, to spin, to scam his way back upright. Then he reached page 14. Warranty of solvency. That was the poison pill. Simple, lethal, clean. The borrower guarantees all liabilities are disclosed. Any undisclosed debt over $5,000 triggers immediate default and an automatic transfer of the property deed to the lender. Sarah later told me Julian went still. A full minute, eyes locked on that paragraph. Sweat forming at his hairline. He knew exactly what it meant. He had gambling debts, tens of thousands owed to people who didn't send invoices. He started to speak. Probably to stall. Probably to negotiate. But Sarah leaned forward and delivered the line we had rehearsed. Loud enough for Evelyn to hear. Is there a problem with standard disclosures, Mr. Fairbanks? It's boilerplate. Unless, of course, a successful tycoon like you has unsavory debts with bookies or loan sharks. Evelyn laughed, radiant with pride. Don't be ridiculous. Julian doesn't gamble. He invests. The trap snapped shut. Julian had 2 choices. Refuse to sign and confess. Right there. That he was a fraud who'd set their lives on fire, or sign. Pray we wouldn't check. And live to lie another day. He chose the lie. No problem, he said, voice cracking. Where do I sign? He scribbled his name. Evelyn signed beside him, beaming, never realizing she'd just handed her deed to a shell company owned by the daughter she'd disowned. They celebrated. They believed they'd beaten the bank. Beaten consequences, beaten me. The ink wasn't even dry before Sarah sent the confirmation. Documents signed. Warranty breached. Asset secured. I was in my car eating a sandwich when my phone buzzed. I took another bite. It tasted like victory. The closing meeting was set for 10 a.m. at an upscale notary office, downtown, mahogany polish, old money air. The exact stage Evelyn loved. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. Through the glass, I saw them. Evelyn in her best pearls. Bianca live streaming with a pout. Julian laughing with the notary like a man who'd gotten away with it. I opened the door. Julian's laugh died. Bianca lowered her phone. Evelyn's face hardened into a scowl. What are you doing here? She snapped. If you're here to beg because you're jealous of your brother's success, leave. Actually, since you're here, go pour water for the lawyers. Try not to spill it, you useless girl. I didn't answer. I walked to the sideboard, poured a glass, listened to the ice click against crystal, and drank it slowly while staring at Julian. Then I opened my hand and let the glass drop. A dull thud into thick carpet. I walked to the head of the table, the seat reserved for the lender. Sarah stood, pulled the chair out for me, and said, sharp as a blade, Miss Maya, please, take your seat. I sat. Set my portfolio down. I didn't come to pour water, Mother. I own the company. Julian blinked. Nemesis Holdings? That's an investment firm. Nemesis Holdings is a single-member LLC, I said evenly. And I'm the single member. I slid a file across the table. Julian opened it and turned pale. Inside, the background check, his gambling debts laid out in humiliating detail, plus maxed out credit cards opened in Bianca's name. You signed a warranty of solvency yesterday, I said. You swore you had no undisclosed debts over 5,000. I leaned in. You lied. Julian panicked. Wait, this is just paperwork. We can fix it. I can explain. Sarah didn't look at him. She stamped the final document with a heavy, rhythmic thunk. The default clause is self-executing, Mr. Fairbanks, she said. Due to fraudulent misrepresentation. The deed transferred to Nemesis Holdings, effective immediately. It was recorded with the county 10 minutes ago. She clicked her briefcase shut, nodded once to me, and stood. The house is yours, Miss Maya. I'll leave you to handle tenant notification. She walked out. The lock clicked. We were alone. Silence filled the room, like all the oxygen had been pulled out. Evelyn's face drained to ash. Not anger, now fear. Real fear. The first time she looked at me like someone she couldn't intimidate. You, she whispered. You stole my house. I saved it from the bank, I corrected. And then Julian handed it to me because he couldn't stop lying for 5 minutes. Evelyn's voice broke into a wail. How could you? We're your family. I looked at her and felt nothing, no rage, no heartbreak, just cold clarity. You want to know why this happened? I said. Because you loved the lie of your son more than the truth of your daughter. You saw the notices. You knew he forged signatures. You pretended not to see it because admitting he failed would mean admitting you failed. I pointed at Julian, shaking, head in his hands. You chose the beautiful lie. Now you have neither the lie nor the house. It isn't tragedy, Mother. It's math. Evelyn deflated in her chair. Bianca stared at me, realizing her lifestyle had just lost its backdrop. You have 30 days, I said. Use them wisely. I left without looking back. From the notary office, I went straight to the police precinct with the forged HELOC documents and hospital records proving my mother was unconscious when she supposedly signed. Fraud over 5,000 is a felony. They arrested Julian 3 hours later. Evelyn got her notice to quit the next morning. 30 days. She left with 4 suitcases and a box of photo albums. Moved into a month-to-month efficiency on the edge of town. No dining room. No audience. I never returned to that house. The moment the title cleared, I listed it. A developer bought it for land value and bulldozed the legacy Evelyn worshipped into modern condos. The proceeds went into my investment portfolio, the first time that house ever produced value instead of draining it. 2 weeks later, I sat in a cafe in Rome with an espresso, finally light. My phone rang, unknown number. It was Evelyn on a prepaid, crying the jagged sobs of a woman with nowhere left to perform. Maya, please. I have nowhere to go. Can I stay in your apartment? Just a few weeks until Julian gets bail? I watched the Roman sunset and thought of every time she made me smaller. You told me you no longer saw me as your daughter, I said softly. I'm just respecting your wishes. I ended the call, blocked the number, and ordered another coffee. Have you ever been the safety net for people who treat you like a burden? Tell me in the comments, and if you believe in smart justice, hit subscribe.